Today, we're discussing the recent passing of Pope Francis. It's been a shock for many, as he was not only the leader of the Catholic Church, but also a global figure of peace and compassion. How are you processing the news?
Honestly, it's still sinking in. Pope Francis was such a unique figure. His compassion, his approach to leadership, and how he connected with people. I mean, he wasn't just a religious leader, he was a global ambassador for peace and social justice.
Absolutely. And what strikes me is how his tenure was marked by so many progressive views, especially on issues like climate change, the refugee crisis, and economic inequality. He really did challenge the status quo.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to speak out, even when it was controversial. Take his stance on climate change, for example. He didn't just call for change, he urged the world to act immediately. That's a kind of leadership that's not often seen from such a position.
Right. It's rare for someone in such a powerful position to push for such bold action. But what do you think his passing means for the future of the Catholic Church? How will it shape the next papacy?
That's a tough question. Pope Francis was beloved by so many, especially for his humility and openness. It'll be hard for his successor to fill those shoes. I think the Church will face pressure to continue his work, especially in terms of social issues. But there could also be a shift in direction, depending on who they elect next.
You make a great point. I think one of the biggest questions will be whether the next pope continues with the reforms Pope Francis pushed for, or if the Church will move back to more traditional stances. What kind of legacy do you think Pope Francis will leave behind?
I think his legacy will definitely be one of inclusivity and compassion. He showed that the Church could evolve, even on complex issues like LGBTQ+ rights, poverty, and the role of women. There's still a long way to go, but he opened the door for dialogue. That's something that could stick around for a while.
I agree. And speaking of change, Pope Francis was very vocal about his desire to decentralize the power within the Vatican, making it more global and less centered in Rome. Do you think this will have a lasting impact on how the Church operates in the future?
That's something I'm really curious about. He worked hard to give more authority to bishops and local leaders around the world, essentially trying to make the Church more connected to the people. If the next pope continues that, it could fundamentally alter how decisions are made within the Church.
And it would be interesting to see if that leads to a more diverse and representative leadership. Pope Francis himself was seen as a pope of the people, often breaking away from the traditional image of the papacy. Do you think we'll see another pope with a similar focus on people-first leadership?
That's a tough one. I mean, Pope Francis was incredibly charismatic and had an extraordinary ability to connect with people. I think it's possible we could see someone similar, but there's a real pressure for the next pope to maintain the Church's traditional authority as well. Striking that balance will be key.
Absolutely. And let's not forget his approach to interfaith dialogue. Pope Francis was particularly known for reaching out to other religions, striving to build bridges instead of walls. That's another part of his legacy that could be tested in the future, right?
Yeah, I think his interfaith work will be one of his most important contributions. By reaching out to Muslims, Jews, and other faiths, he not only promoted peace, but also worked towards understanding and cooperation. The next pope will face the challenge of maintaining that spirit of unity, especially in a world that's increasingly divided.
It's so true. And you know, beyond just his work in the Church, Pope Francis had a significant impact on how world leaders thought about ethics, responsibility, and human dignity. How do you think world politics will respond to his death?
I think his passing could spark a period of reflection. Politicians and global leaders often looked to him for guidance on moral and ethical issues. The fact that he wasn't afraid to speak out against injustice, even when it meant confronting powerful figures, means his loss will be deeply felt on the world stage.
His death could also shift how global issues are framed. For example, his calls for peace in war-torn regions and his push for climate action may now be felt even more acutely. Do you think we'll see a change in how the world approaches these issues without his voice?
It's possible, especially in the realm of climate change. Pope Francis was one of the loudest voices advocating for environmental protection. Without him, some of those issues may lose the same sense of urgency, but I also think that his legacy will live on through the people he inspired. There are already many activists and leaders who carry forward his vision.
That's true. And you mentioned earlier the role of women in the Church. Pope Francis was progressive in some ways, but he was also very cautious when it came to women's roles. Do you think his successor will push further on this issue?
That's a big question. Pope Francis did make some strides, like creating more opportunities for women in leadership positions within the Vatican. But there's still a lot of room for change, especially when it comes to the ordination of women. I think it will take a more radical shift in leadership to see real change there, though.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most complex issues. But overall, Pope Francis's reign was marked by efforts to modernize the Church, particularly in terms of outreach, social issues, and global leadership. His passing will definitely leave a gap, but it also opens up space for new conversations about what the future of the Church could look like.
Exactly. It's a time of great change and uncertainty, but also a moment to reflect on the progress we've made and the work that's still left to do. Pope Francis leaves behind a complex, lasting legacy, and it will be fascinating to see how the next pope builds upon it.
Well said. It'll be interesting to see how the Church adapts and how the world responds. Thanks for such an insightful conversation today.
Of course, always a pleasure. Let's keep an eye on what comes next.